What is going on, my good people? Welcome back to the channel. This is Unnecessary Rambling. I am Brandon Sylvia. Thank you all for stopping by today to predict the future of PlayStation and Xbox. Going to be talking about some releases, so some of the big releases for each brand over the next 5 years. Talk a little bit about the business side of things on the back end. Everything will be timestamped down below so you can sift through it as you wish. And yeah, this was voted on by you guys over on YouTube at the little community tab. I posted 4 options for whichever video you wanted to select, and whichever video won, I would make a video about that topic. And so here we are, predicting the future of PlayStation and Xbox, the next 5 years, which I think is a really important 5-year stretch. You know, you're talking about from 2024, we'll kind of skip 2023, the back end of 2023, from 2024 to 2028, which we've heard that 2028 will probably be the final year of this console generation. So a really important 5-year stretch. So works out perfectly. And yeah, how about we go ahead and kick this thing off? Real close vote though, real close vote over there on the community tab. So I might make a couple videos about some of those other topics as well. There's some shit there that I think it's only like 2-3 votes apart from almost all of the 4 different options. So yeah, make sure to stay tuned to the community tab. I have a bunch of ideas for different videos that I want to make, and I'm going to let you guys pick a lot of the stuff that's made here on the channel. So definitely stay tuned for that. All right, so how about we kick this thing off by going year by year through PlayStation and Xbox, going through all of their releases, predicting the releases, and I'm just going to rapid fire through these because, you know, we got a lot of other stuff that we're going to get to here as well, but we're going to go through, I'm going to predict what will be released each year for PlayStation and Xbox on an exclusive front, and then we'll also predict how the year is generally received by the community at large. So let's start off with PlayStation 2024, and the lineup that I believe we will see is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Stellar Blade, Silent Hill 2, Rise of the Ronin, Astro VR, and Concord. So the big, I would say, surprise here is probably Astro VR. It hasn't even been announced yet at this point, but I do think at some point we have to see a little bit more first-party support from Sony for PSVR 2. But I do think, and you'll see going on for the rest of the list, I think this will be the last first-party game of any significance that we see from Sony for PSVR 2. I think that will kind of be the death nail for PSVR 2, unfortunately. But yeah, and everything else here, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we know that's going to be a smash hit. Stellar Blade is one that I'm not 1000% sure about. I think at its peak, what it could be when it's at its highest potential, I think it could be a Bayonetta, but on a much better platform, a much more powerful console, which I would love for that to be the case. I think that's a great aspiration, but I do think it could very well be a couple steps down in the character action genre. It might not be on the level of your Devil May Cry, on the level of your Bayonetta, but that's fine. Even if it's a serviceable game in that genre, I love that genre. Silent Hill 2 there's a lot of question marks there for sure. You know, with Bloober being very hit or miss. I will say they are very committed to the horror genre. They seem to love the horror genre, and the story is already there. I think if they can just make somewhat competent combat, I think this should be the biggest. It'll be the biggest game they've ever made, but it could be the biggest game they've ever made for all the wrong reasons. So, but I don't think so. I think this actually will be pretty damn solid. Rise of the Ronin could be the big hit for Team Ninja. You know, with Neo 2 being selling pretty well, but they haven't really had that resounding success yet. Rise of the Ronin, I could very well see that being the case for that team. Concord, I think, will be a dud. I don't think it'll be, you know, we got to respect Bungie, put some respect on their name. I get that, but I don't see this being something all that significant. But overall, I think that's a good lineup of games, even with a couple misses in there. I think that's a B level year across the board for PlayStation for 2024. Very not great in the first party front, but a lot of third party and second party exclusives in the work there that make it a B year across the board, in my opinion. Into 2024, I think we see Avowed, Flight Sim, Hellblade 2, and Towerborn. And Avowed, I'm predicting to be the first game that we see from Xbox in 2024. I don't think it's going to be that Skyrim level success that people were maybe hoping for when we got that first trailer. I think it'll be much more similar to Avowed or to Outer Worlds in scale and probably in reception as well. I think that 2024 will be a much lighter year for games in general. So I think it could be like in the final six for game of the year, but I don't think it'll be like that game of the generation style title that maybe people were hoping for. Flight Sim 2024, probably similar success from Flight Sim that came out in 2020 or 2021. It won't be anything that moves the needle, but it'll be a great game and praised unanimously. Hellblade 2, if they clean up that combat, if they clean up that puzzle solving, this is going to be a juggernaut. Will they? I don't know. I'm not totally confident on that. If it was significantly improved, I think we would have already seen it by now. So I'm expecting it to be a similar level of success as the first game. Towerborn, the Banner Saga team, similar to Flight Sim, I don't think it's going to be a needle mover, but I think it's going to be a well-made, very good game. Moving on to 2025 for PlayStation, we have Fair Games, Death Stranding 2, Wolverine, Project Bates, Sony Ben's new IP. Fair Games, I think, is going to flop catastrophically. I think there's so many games that look just like this. So many games. It just has nothing unique about it, in my opinion. Another, Payday style game, Watchdog style game, it just in its vibe, in its tone. And I don't know. I can't see this thing really doing anything in the live service space. But I could be wrong. Supposedly Sony was very invested in the technology that Haven Studios, what they were creating internally, that they wanted them first party. They wanted to buy them up, gobble them up, get them in their ecosystem. So maybe I could be wrong on that one, but I don't think I am. Death Stranding 2, I think, will be exactly the same as Death Stranding 1. Some people will love it. Some people will hate it. It probably won't sell all that well, but it's good to be associated with Hideo Kojima. Wolverine, I think, is going to be a breakout hit for Insomniac. And you're probably like, well, what the fuck? Spider-Man was already a breakout hit for Insomniac. I mean a breakout hit in the way that Insomniac is received as storytellers. They don't get enough credit, in my opinion, for always delivering really good narratives. Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man 2018, I think is maybe my favorite Spider-Man story in media, period. And I think Wolverine being darker, being more gritty, hopefully having that M rating, that M ESRB rating attached to it, I think it will give them much more range to go places you probably wouldn't expect. And obviously much more bloody, much more gory. Give me that Xbox 360 Wolverine game impaling motherfuckers and shit. I'm so on board for it, but try not to be biased here, trying to analyze this from an objective perspective as I predict 5 years of nonsense. Anyways, Wolverine, I think it's going to be a smash hit, and I think it'll be the breakout game for Insomniac on a storytelling level. Project Bates, this is coming from Ballistic Moon, that is made up of a lot of super massive talent. And to see a PlayStation first party game that operates somewhat like a supermassive game with narrative agency, but hopefully having some combat, maybe playing like a Resident Evil game, but having, a little bit of choice and consequence in the mix there. That sounds absolutely excellent, but who knows if it will be. And Sony Ben's new IP. This is being built off the bones of Days Gone. It's going to be an open world game. We know that. It's going to be a live service game. I think we know that. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I remember seeing something about a live service game. Listen, here's the thing. Days Gone is a really good game. It launched really poorly. You can't have that happen with live service titles. And there's so much bread on the table and only so much butter. PlayStation knows going into this live service initiative that a lot of their shit is going to fail. This is going to be one that fails. Fair Games is going to be one that fails. What I predict is going to happen with the Sony Ben new live service game is that it launches disastrously, technical problems out the wazoo, and then it's cleaned up 6 months later, a year later, the player base is completely gone at that point. So that's my prediction for PlayStation in 2025. Overall, I would give that around a C range for a year. Couple hits, couple misses, around a C. 2025 for Xbox. I'm saying Contraband, Kojima's Cloud game, the new Doom game, and Fable is what we get for 2025 in the Xbox ecosystem. Contraband, I think, could be a smash hit for Avalanche. I think they make awesome open worlds with incredible interactivity, environmental interactivity, a bunch of just great physics, great destructibility in their worlds. Combining that into a drug smuggling game with, drug smuggling, running drugs, running guns with buddies, I think could be really cool. I also think it could never see the light of day. Who knows? Kojima's Cloud game, I think this will be a miss on all fronts. I just don't think people care about playing a cloud game. If it's something that you can download as well, maybe it'll have some success. I can't see a 2-hour little cloud experiment really breaking through in any meaningful way. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think. I think we're years and years away from people accepting streaming as like the main way that they play games. And that doesn't mean that this can't be a smaller, more niche indie style hit, which I believe in an interview he said this is more of a smaller indie focused game, but in collaboration with Xbox. We'll see. Not expecting anything big from it at all. The new Doom game, it'll be just like the other two Doom games. It'll be incredibly well received and fans will love it, and it'll be a resounding success. Fable, I don't know. Playgrounds never attempted something this ambitious. They've made great open world games, no doubt. This is an open world action adventure RPG with choice and consequence and branching narrative paths and, third person combat and gear and loot and all these things that you have to account for. And I just could see that being very, very overwhelming. Obviously, they'll be hiring new talent, yada, yada, yada. I don't know. I think if you get high 7s, low 8s on Fable, you consider it a success. But I'm not even sure that they get that. I'm not really confident about this. I'm just going to be totally honest. I'm not really confident about this game. But overall, 2025 for Xbox, I would say that that's going to be around a C tier year for Xbox. Into 2026 for PlayStation, we kick it off with Horizon, the MMO, Factions 2, Ghost 2, London Studios' new game, new Uncharted game, and Twisted Metal. So there's a lot in here to kind of dive through. Obviously, the first thing on the board that is the most shocking is the Uncharted game. We don't know anything about this. All we have is that little teaser that people believe is Cassie Drake. It looks more like it's something from a movie, but that's all we have to go off of. But here's my thing with the Uncharted game. If it is true, I think it comes from Bluepoint. I think that here's my theory. If the whole idea that Bluepoint is now working on original content, which they won't say a new IP, just original content. My theory is that's either Bloodborne 2 or that's a new Uncharted game, because I was thinking for a while that it would be Metal Gear Solid 3. It's not that. So I'm thinking it's something that they own, either. The only thing with Bloodborne 2, if it is Bloodborne 2, the FromSoft fans are going to jump off cliffs, losing their minds, screaming and just going nuts. They're going to be so angry that it's not FromSoft developing it. Whereas if it's Uncharted, I think fans are actually going to be really, really happy just to see Uncharted back in the mix. And I can only speak for myself personally. I would love to know that Uncharted is being worked on by Bluepoint, a very talented team. And then we also have Naughty Dog freed up to work on something else as well down the line, which we'll talk about. So that would really leave me pumped. So I guess I'm hopeful that it is Uncharted, but I could maybe see it being Bloodborne 2, but I don't think the reception to that would be, they made Demon Souls and that was received positively, but I just don't think a Bloodborne 2 without FromSoft's involvement, I think the fans would lose their shit. I think with the Horizon MMO, I think that's the first big breakout live service hit for PlayStation. I think this is a juggernaut. You're talking about a Monster Hunter style game, playing it with your buddies in Horizon's awesome ass world. I think that is a absolute success, especially being developed on a premier AAA level. You have something like Wild Hearts, which is comparable, but I think this will be much more expensive, much more ambitious, and I think it'll be a real success. Factions 2, on the other hand, I do not believe will be a success. I think what Bungie said is probably true, and that's even if Bungie lets this thing get out the door. If Bungie essentially said that the game is solid, but there's not enough in there to keep people hooked, keep people engaged, keep people coming back 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. Like there's just not enough built up content to keep people coming back. There's not that hook. It seems to be the main theory surrounding factions too, and I would have to probably believe that that's the truth. It seems that it could be likely that we don't even see factions 2 ever release, but I'm going to say it releases. I'm going to say it's probably the most polished live service game we've ever seen in our life in terms of a moment to moment perspective. I think the gameplay is going to be incredible, but I don't think, like Bungie said, I think in 6 months everybody will be gone because there's not that hook. There's not that reason to keep coming back to it. And yeah, so I don't know whether you call that a success or a failure. I guess depends on your perspective, but I think it will, in terms of a critical reception, it'll probably be received well, but in terms of a commercial viability to continue working on it, I think after a year or two, support for it will probably stop and it'll be a dead game. Ghost of Tsushima 2. This is one where I have some opinions, man. I think they're going to focus a lot on that whatever Legends mode, where the co-op mode. I think they're going to expand upon that greatly. I think it's going to be very much more in the live service realm, and they're going to put a ton of attention and focus into that. I also think you're going to have a fully playable single player campaign that has nothing to do with live service monetization, yada, yada, yada. But I do think that the co-op mode is going to be fused into a live service mode that they want to keep as an ongoing service. And I just, once again, I think it will hurt the putting focus and emphasis on that. I think will take away from the main campaign. And I just think you'll have a still a good game, but it probably won't be received as well as something like Ghost of Tsushima 1. So London studio, it's damn near impossible to predict this. The new sci-fi, or no, it's the new fantasy. What are they calling it? Fantasy game set in London. It kind of has a sci-fi look to it. I'll put in the concept art here for you to see it, but I'm not really expecting anything too mind-blowing from this. I expect it to come out and probably get some support for a little while and then end up fading into obscurity. Twisted Metal, I think that 2026 makes a lot of sense. We could probably see the next season of Twisted Metal on Peacock try to, have some brand synergy there, a perfect alignment where this comes out right in time for the second season. And it was a smash hit on Peacock, which really surprised me. I've watched a couple episodes, thought it was okay. But anywho, the game, if it's being made by Lucid, the developers of fucking Destruction Playground, Destruction, whatever, the Destruction game on PS5, the little car game, if it's made by them, which rumor suggests that it is being made by them, probably won't fare well at all, and it'll be in one ear and out the other. People will forget about it in a few months. So overall, though, for 2026, I think that's around a C+ year for PlayStation. I think Ghost of Tsushima will be good, not great. Factions 2 will be a really well-made game, just with no long-term support. Horizon MMO, I think, will be a smash success. London studio game, I think, will probably fail. Twisted Metal game, I think, will probably fail. And hell, I guess we didn't even talk about the what I believe the critical reception to Uncharted will be. I think it'll actually be received really well. Bluepoint's incredibly damn talented. And yeah, there's I could see you playing as maybe Nathan Drake and Cassie Drake at certain times and swapping between the two perspectives, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff you could probably do with that game. So overall, I think that's like a C+ level year. So some failures, but some pretty big hits in there as well. 2026 for Xbox. We get Gear 6, Clockwork Revolution, State of Decay 3, South of Midnight, and a new Double Fine IP. That's a juggernaut of a year. And one of these years it's going to happen for Xbox. There's just too much on the horizon, too much waiting in the wings, and one of these years we're going to get a big one. I expect it to be 2026. Gears 6, I think, will be received similarly to Gears 5, where it's not setting the world on fire and reinventing the third-person shooter, but I think it will be received well. The fans will like it. The fans will enjoy it. Critics will receive it well. It'll probably be high 8s, low 9s, or, I'd say mid to high 8s, but damn high quality game. Clockwork Revolution, on the other hand, I think will possibly be the best game of the generation. This might be my hot take of the video, but I almost can't see this failing. And I say that because, well, for one, the developer has a fucking history of creating some of the best narrative driven games ever, with in the CRP genre, with incredible agency in the narrative, incredible choice and consequence. And now they're fusing that into a BioShock inspired first person shooter with a time manipulation mechanic, while also creating your character, while also giving you tons of choice and consequence in the story. Like, I just don't see how this could possibly fail. A developer of that pedigree, of that caliber, now having $300 million to create a masterpiece, and taking that opportunity and running with it and trying to knock that damn ball out of the park. I respect the shit out of it. This is kind of the dream scenario when people get bought by a company, which I'm not a fan of acquisition, but when a smaller, really talented team gets bought by a company, and then they branch off and just fucking, Babe Ruth, Barry Bonds, fucking, when they go for it, when they try to put the ball out of the park. That's the shit I really, really, really respect. And Clockwork Revolution, what a departure from the games they've created before, and that they're aiming for something big, and I really, really hope that it lands, and I think it will land. So that's my I guess my bold prediction of the video. Clockwork Revolution, I think, will be one of, if not the best game of this generation. And then State of Decay 3, I almost debated not even including it on this list. I don't know if it comes out ever. There was all that rumor and reporting from Jason Schreier that the studio was just in total flames, just turmoil from front to back. And then you hear reporting on the other end where it's like they're working with Unreal Engine 5 for State of Decay 3. The coalition's coming in and assisting with development, and like, then you're like, oh damn, this could be really, really good. If you think of Gears of War or just solid third person shooting combined with all the systems and the management that you get from State of Decay 3, you can talk about something spectacular. Will it be that? Probably not. I think you probably get something that's a little bit disappointing. It's hit too many roadblocks, too many hurdles to come out on the other side as like this spectacular thing. But I think we still end up getting a game like State of Decay 2 that's a high quality title across the board, but maybe not the improvement that people were hoping for or expecting. South of Midnight from Compulsion, the makers of We Happy Few and Contraband. I would predict here that this is a significant improvement over We Happy Few and Contraband in terms of the moment to moment. The narrative's always great. The art style's always great. Very imaginative studio, but I still don't think they crossed the finish line into just this masterclass of a moment to moment combat system or anything like that with South of Midnight. And all we have is that little teaser to go off of. So who knows? Could be wrong on that, but I think everything will just be significantly cleaned up, but still not to that level of like a big breakout hit for South of Midnight. Double Fine's new IP. We know now that there are multiple games in development for Double Fine, I believe. And I think Tim Schafer said that Psychonauts 2 is not their next game. So I'm assuming that the new IP will be the next game. My prediction here is that it will be another kind of AAA Psychonauts 2 in scope, similar to that. Because I think if it wasn't going to be that, if it was going to be, similar to like Broken Age or a smaller title, that we would already see it by now. You know what I mean? Because like they were so prolific at a time, it seemed like they were releasing a new game every year. And yeah, I think it's probably going to be bigger in scale. And if it wasn't bigger in scale, I think we'd already have heard about it by now. Psychonauts 2 is 2021. We're closing off 2023, and we know nothing about Double Fine's new IP. So I think it's going to be big, and I think it'll be a big hit for them. They make really great, interesting games, and I would love to see what they do with a new IP in general. But overall, 2026 for Xbox, this is the best year that we've covered so far. If they can hit on something of this level, this is an epic year. This is an all-time great year. I would say an A- across the board. This is a fantastic year full of fantastic games. I'm calling these non-existent games fantastic. I guess, sure, that works. Into 2027, we have PlayStation's 2027 lineup of Insomniac's live service game, Housemarque's new IP, Santa Monica's new IP, and Naughty Dog's new IP. There's a lot of new IP here. Everything's a new IP here, except one, which we'll go ahead and talk about, which kind of a new IP, kind of not, however you define it. Insomniac's live service game. I am debating. I just don't think it's going to be Resistance. I don't think you get in bed with Marvel the way that they are and then go back to Resistance. It just doesn't make sense to me. We know they're supposedly working on a new multiplayer game. I just can't imagine why they would return to Resistance after the money they're making with the Marvel IP. So my theory is it's either going to be a Spider-Man multiplayer game where you're playing as Miles and Peter, and then maybe throwing in, Venom and Carnage and just different characters to play as, Kraven or whoever, in this Destiny style game, or kind of similar to like the DC online game. I could see that maybe in the Spider-Man universe, but really what I think would be the humongous smash hit would be if it's just a straight up Marvel game universe online title where you get to play as any of the damn Marvel characters. Throughout the years, you're getting constant DLC drip fed to you, where you're getting the X-Men pack of characters and the Fantastic Four pack of characters that you pay $20-$30 for. And it's just this constant nonstop drip feed, this monetization, I mean, the money that's a cash cow. And if any team is going to do it successfully, it's going to be Insomniac. And Marvel has to be itching for that. We saw it with Avengers. It just didn't take off. I think a team like Insomniac actually could pull this off. But it's a fucking really difficult challenge. And if I'm being totally honest, as big of a hit as I think this would be, I would be so bummed if this was the direction Insomniac went, because that's another team that we'd be losing to a sweatshop. That's a Call of Duty style juggernaut, and you're not coming back from that. After you see that type of money, after that cash cow really produces the milk, that's a disgusting way of phrasing that, but you know what I mean? You're not coming back from that. And I would hate to see Insomniac lost to that live service sweatshop. But I don't know, man. I think there's too much money on the table for someone not to pull the trigger at some point. But yeah, you could see it, like a bunch of mini games in the mix, and having the more Destiny style narrative driven quest that you're going and doing with your buddies, and picking different characters, and all the loot that costs $10 for a fucking a new toenail skin, and you got earring that cost you 100 real fucking US dollars. Like, absolutely, they would milk the shit out of that if they could. I mean, it would make so much money. It would make so much money if it was done right. That's the thing. It has to be done right. And we already saw with the Crystal Dynamics Avengers game, wasn't done right. So who knows, man? Who knows? Housemarque's new IP, I think it would just be Returnal didn't sell well, so I think it would just be a more accessible third-person shooter, probably still with kinetic gameplay, probably extremely damn fun, just probably more accessible to guarantee higher sales numbers across the board. Santa Monica's new IP, we know this is going to be a sci-fi game headed up by Cory Barlog, the 2018 director for God of War. Santa Monica's never made anything outside of God of War other than Kinetica back in the day. I think that was a launch title on the PlayStation 2, if I'm not mistaken. And so since 2005, they've been making nothing but God of War games, and they've been incredibly successful with that IP. But, they also have, it's not to say that they haven't been drastically different from one game to another. You look at 2018's God of War, that is a wildly different game than the God of War trilogy from 2005 to 2010, I think was God of War 3, if I'm not mistaken. But in that 5-year span, those games were drastically different than 2018's God of War. And so this team could pull off something different. I just hope it's not like a sci-fi hack and slash third-person melee version of God of War. You know what I mean? I hope it's like a totally different genre, a totally different perspective. Not necessarily saying first person, not necessarily saying not an action adventure game, but it'd just be cool to play like a third-person shooter developed by them or something. I hope it's quite a bit different. Naughty Dog's new IP, I think this is where Naughty Dog returns back to its bread and butter, and they return to what they're excellent at. They're the best in the world at making very narrative driven cinematic games from the third person perspective. And I think that, they get the live service bug out of their system. They get back to what they excel at better than anybody in the world, and they make a smash hit here. Don't know what it'll be. I've said forever that I hope they make a James Bond style detective thriller game. I would absolutely love to see that. I have no idea, but whatever it's going to be, if it's single player, if it's narrative driven, it'll be a smash hit. So overall, I think that's around a B level year for PlayStation. 2027 for Xbox, we lead it off with Indiana Jones, Rare's new IP, The Evil Within 3, and Dishonored 3. So 2027, I think that out of this lineup, I think the Indiana Jones game has the highest likelihood of being a flop. I just don't think that game is going to hit. I don't think the Indiana Jones IP, I don't think it has a lot of weight to it anymore. I wonder if I wonder if Machine Games, the maker of Wolfenstein, I wonder if it's going to be first person. I think if it is, and I have a feeling it would be, I think it'll just totally throw off people. Why are we playing as, we get this one iconic character, this one just licensed character in general to play as on Xbox, and we can't even see him. I don't know. I could see it playing maybe more like a Dying Light style first person platformer with a lot less action. I just don't think people would really be into that at all, but who knows? You'd have to imagine it'll be third person. That might just be me being cynical, but I don't know. I hope it's good. I doubt it. Rare's new IP, I think this will be another live service game. I don't think they're ever going to release Everwild. I think after the success of Sea of Thieves, I think that they're going to take the lessons learned in the live service realm and apply it to a new game. I could see this being more along the lines of a Fortnite, a third person shooter or something in that realm. But the Sea of Thieves didn't start off as like this smash success, this smash hit. They molded it into that, and they've learned so much along the way. I would imagine they would really like to get off the ground, especially by 2027. You're looking at Game Pass probably having 35-40 million players. At that point, you would really want to launch something to a huge player pool and have it be established, ready to go, and have it be like out the gate great. And I think they could do that with a new live service title. And dude, another avenue that they could go is like a Smash competitor. You have Activision now, you have Blizzard now, you have Bethesda now, you have obviously all the Xbox franchises, the Halos and the Gears and this and that, and then all the iconic Rare characters, the Banjo, the Joanna Dark. Like, you could really have a sick lineup for a Smash style game. And got to assume Xbox is going to acquire quite a bit more studios in the coming years. So that actually could be kind of sick to have a Smash style game from Rare. And I think if you're going to develop that style of game, it's going to be a service game, and you're going to want to lean on someone with that service experience. And nobody in their first party lineup has that experience in spades more than Rare. So I think that could make sense. The Evil Within 3, maybe this is just a hopeful pick. I don't know. Hi-Fi Rush seemed to be a huge success. Maybe they go to Hi-Fi Rush 2, but I would love to see the Evil Within 3 get another crack at success. More of a, some more resources handed to Tango to see if they can really make something special here. I think the first two games are really special. I think they're the best survival horror games, modern survival horror games on the market. But, hey, maybe I don't know. I can't sit here and say honestly, maybe it is just me, but I can't sit here and say honestly, if this launched day one in Game Pass to 40 million people, I think people would, because there is that investment of, do I go out and buy this $60 new IP, back in the day, the Evil Within 1 in 2014 or whatever, do I go out and buy this new IP for $60, or do I go buy another Resident Evil game? And it's just true. New IP just have a harder time of getting players to invest into it. You don't have that built-in nostalgia or that connection. So I get that. But having a 40 million player base for Game Pass in 2027, the Evil Within 3 launches and maybe 10 million people download it, and they're like, holy shit, especially if it's a significant step forward from The Evil Within 2, which is already, in my opinion, like a 9.6 out of 10, one of the greatest survival horror games ever. I think people would eat that shit up. So yeah, I'm being hopeful, but fuck it, whatever. Dishonored 3. I think we also see Arcane Leon. Yeah, Arcane Austin was Redfall. Leon is Dishonored. I think we see Leon go back to the roots a little bit. Deathloop, I could see Deathloop 2 being, the 2027 game from Arcane Leon. That seemed to be the biggest game they've ever released by far. But, return back to the roots a little bit. There's a little bit of stink on the Arcane name from Redfall, obviously not Leon, but still returning back to the roots, satiating that player base. I actually do think that that's what we'll see. And overall for 2027 in Xbox land, I think we settle in around a B minus. Then going on into 2028 for PlayStation, we're looking at Horizon 3, Knights of the Old Republic remake, and Final Fantasy VII Part 3. Horizon 3, swan song, closing off the generation with probably the baddest, boldest, biggest technical blockbuster of the generation. They already, at the point of recording this, they've produced the what I would say is the most impressive game on a technical front of the generation so far. I think they close off the generation in the same way with 2028 being the final year of the PlayStation 5 life cycle. Horizon 3 comes out, knocks it out of the damn park with and also it's going to be totally different on a technical level. Not to spoil anything, but for those of you who finished Forbidden West, it's not going to be the same setting. It's not going to be the same style of gameplay. This is going to be a very, very different style of game. And I cannot wait to see what they do. We know Decima Engine. We know that it's just a technical powerhouse. Those developers over there are magicians. This thing is going to be outrageous. KOTOR remake. So this is maybe the most surprising thing that I have on the list in general. And that is because I there's two parts of me. One part of me believes this thing will never see the light of day. Another part of me believes that, okay, it left Aspire. It's now with Saber. It'll one day leave Saber, go to Eidos, Montreal, the makers of Deus Ex, and they'll get it out the door. And, but in reality, even if that happens, what I think is most likely, if I'm being totally honest, is that it's a Saber developed game. It comes out in 2028 after having to go in and clean that shit all the way up from what Aspire was creating, clean it all the way up and get it out the door in 2028 after facing all those hurdles and developmental challenges just to see this thing launch. I think will be the success. Realistically, I don't think Eidos Montreal is going to get their hands on this game. I don't think Embracer's taking shit and moving it around to that degree. Maybe they are. I don't know. But, hell, Dead Island 2, kind of the same little scenario there of, Hot Potato ending up in, who the fuck made, was it one of the original Division developers who ended up getting, it doesn't matter. I would hope that we get something like that where KOTOR remake ends up into Eidos Montreal's hand and we just get an absolute juggernaut of a remake. I doubt that ends up happening. I think it just barely crosses the finish line, limps and falls over, and then we see it release, but not to much acclaim at all. Final Fantasy VII Part 3, we close up the series with a beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful game, wonderful cap to the generation and a cap to an iconic video game. So overall, I think that's a C minus year of not much in terms of quantity, some pretty high quality there with Horizon and Final Fantasy VII, and then Knights of the Old Republic remake being, not great at all. 2028 for Xbox, we have Perfect Dark, Halo, Outer Worlds 2, and Project Mara. Perfect Dark, I think, ends up being a third-person shooter, more linear, narrative-driven game. Tomb Raider is probably 2026 when it releases. That's priority number one for Crystal Dynamics. We know that the initiative's barely even a thing. So Crystal Dynamics will get this out the door, I assume, probably 2028-ish. And yeah, I think it'll probably be pretty damn good. If they are going for more of a live service multiplayer style game, I think it'll hurt the game overall. Just because I obviously that's not Crystal Dynamics specialty whatsoever with the disaster of the Avengers. We kind of know that, but I think if it's a more narrative driven style experience, similar to something like Tomb Raider, third person shooter, even if it's a first person shooter, I think it should be fine. Halo, I think this could very likely be, and I think this will be developed by 343. I don't think we're going to see any spin-off Halo games in this generation. I think we'll get one more mainline Halo game to close off the generation for Xbox. I think it'll be received disastrously, and I think it'll be the last Halo game that we see for at least a decade, and I think it could be the last 343 game that we ever see. The Outer Worlds 2 from Obsidian. It's going to be incredible. Incredibly well-made game. It's not going to be anything that once again, not on that level of a Skyrim, not on that level of a Fallout, but just a damn great game. And to me personally, I like the Outer Worlds more than a Skyrim and a Fallout. So it's going to be right up my alley, but it's not going to have that legacy left behind from the Outer Worlds, similar to something like a Fallout or a Skyrim. But still, I think Outer Worlds 2 end up being great. Project Mara. This will be, if Hellblade 2 can't knock it out of the park, I think Project Mara will. This is from Ninja Theory. All we've seen is that little almost this it seems like this lady just grimacing in pain in the trailer. And you look at it and you're like, man, please don't tell me this is going to be another Hellblade 2 style game, another super depressing, melodramatic, over the top. And I don't mean melodramatic in a bad way, but just very depressing, serious, hard hitting game when you just made one of those. I think Ninja Theory will be self-aware enough to pivot a little bit and make something that's a little bit more combat focused, a little bit more gameplay focused, a little bit more of an action adventure game, opposed to, somewhat of a walking sim with some puzzle solving, with some action, but really focusing in on the narrative with Hellblade 2. I think if that doesn't become a huge, just humongous hit, Hellblade 2, I think they'll pivot a little bit with Project Mars. So overall, not a bad year. I would say a C level year overall, a big dip with Halo, but everything else I think is going to be decent enough quality. Perfect Dark I don't think is going to just be a absolute banger, but I think it'll be a good game. Outer Worlds 2, I don't think it'll be a legacy generation defining game, but I think it'll be a great video game. Project Mara, I think will be probably Ninja Theory's breakout hit. We have no idea. We know nothing about it. I'm predicting nebulous shit at this point, but hey, I'm trying my best. All right, so now that we got the lineup out of the way, now that we got the release scheduling out of the way, let's talk some business. Let's break some bread, talk some business, and talk some acquisitions. And let's go ahead and preface all of this by saying I'm not in favor of acquisitions at all. Don't like the idea of big companies gobbling up other big companies or even smaller companies. Typically, it could lead to a dystopic reality that I don't think we are prepared for. And that's a larger societal issue, not just, in the game space, but it is a very relevant part of the game space. Acquisitions are rampant. And it seems that, with this Activision deal going through, I mean, anything can go through at this point. So you can speculate as wild as you want to get at this point. And it's not too wild for me, in my opinion. Like if you were to say EA, EA is not included on mine because once again, it's still so hard for me to fathom that. But if I'm not mistaken, Activision's bigger than EA. So I think anything is on the table when talking acquisitions, but we're going to talk about some things that might make a little bit of sense here. So let's, and it's also why I didn't, in the lineup of games that we were talking about, I didn't really talk about anything from third party other than games or third or second party developers, other than games we already knew about, like a Stellar Blade, like I didn't include Pacific Drive in there, but that would have been another one, like Contraband. We talked about those, but now we're diving into the unknown. This is the total unknown territory, but we'll try to make some sense of these acquisitions a little bit here. I think to start off with PlayStation, obviously the first thing that anyone is going to look at is going to be Square Enix. Everything pointed to this in the last 3 or 4 years, in my opinion, until Phil Spencer and Yoshi P. They shared the stage, and Yoshi P announced that they were going to commit to launching more of their games on Xbox. And I think they signed like some deal for Final Fantasy 14 or whatever. But I still have a tough time seeing a world where Sony doesn't end up acquiring Square Enix. Everything in the world pointed to Square Enix wanting to be bought off a couple years ago, or even last year. So I don't know. I if I had to put money on it by the end of this generation, I do think Sony ends up acquiring Square Enix. I don't think it's a good purchase. Well, depending on what you pay, I don't really think it's a great purchase. With Tomb Raider and Deus Ex and Legacy of Kain and all of that not being in their catalog anymore. Uh, you know, what do you get Dragon Quest, you get Final Fantasy, you get Kingdom Hearts. I don't know. If you can get it for under $1 billion, I guess it makes sense. But $1 billion or more, I don't even think I would pull the trigger on that. But once again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a stock market and data analyst or whatever. But I don't know. I see Square Enix getting bought, but I don't see it being for I don't think it's going to be a good deal on Sony's end. I think Ubisoft, on the other end, I think would actually be a great purchase for Sony because it seems like that's a publisher, if cleaned up, if they had reasonable leadership, like they could be a juggernaut. Ubisoft used to be an absolute juggernaut. They still have extremely relevant IP. They have Assassin's Creed games that sell incredibly well. Valhalla sold more than any other Assassin's Creed game. Far Cry games still sell incredibly well. The Division, I mean, something that's not for most of us, but like Just Dance and now you have the connections to LucasArts and to Disney. You have Star Wars. You have that Avatar game that's coming out in December. And then you have a bunch of dormant IP like Beyond Good and Evil, like Splinter Cell, like Prince of Persia, like Rayman, I think they still have the rights to Driver, if I'm not mistaken. So you have a humongous catalog of games that are relevant right now, games that could be relevant if they weren't fucking languishing off in development hell. Ubisoft just seems like it's a mess, and if it was cleaned up, could actually be a very lucrative purchase. Once again, never in favor of acquisition, but if I'm thinking as Sony, I think that is a smart purchase. Do I see it happening? Probably not, but I do think that's a smart purchase. Um, I I can't really see Sony looking at any other big publishers. The only two realistic options outside of Ubisoft and Square Enix would maybe be Konami or Koei Tecmo. I think that Konami makes sense in terms of the legacy IP that once again are totally dormant, that they're now trying to somewhat get spinning back into relevancy. But I think that, and they do seem to have a partnership with Sony going on, but if Konami's getting back into the business of revitalizing these franchises, I don't think it's to sell off the company. I wouldn't believe, unless it's to, inflate the price that they could sell the company at, which maybe that's a reality, but I don't know. And as far as like independent studios, I think that the one that I would absolutely have my eye on if I was Sony is Ember Lab, the Kena Bridge of Spirits developer. That is a team that possesses powerful technology with their animation department. Whatever the hell they have going on, whatever's in the water over there, you need a sip of. And if you got to pay big bucks for that, I would dish out the cash. I think that's a team that you could instantly turn into a juggernaut, a powerhouse. And yeah, that's one I would definitely have my eye on. Slow Clap, the seafood developer, would be another one that I would absolutely have my eye on. A team with a limited budget made something so excellent, so exciting, so fucking fun. Just thinking about what they could do with a bigger budget is very tantalizing. Striking Distance, the Glenn Schofield, the Glenn Schofield team. I think that studio is one that, especially if they were in a situation where after the Callisto Protocol didn't perform to expectations, if they were ever in a position where they were either going to have to shut down or be bought, I think that's probably a team with a lot of potential, because I do think the Callisto Protocol had potential. I just, there were a couple decisions in there that were a bit questionable, and they cozied up in a major way with PlayStation before the release of that game, going in and using Sony's motion capture studio and shit like that. So there's some kind of relation going on there. And obviously similar with Kana and similar with Sifu. Those are both exclusive. So I'm trying to look at it that way as well. The Callisto Protocol wasn't exclusive, but there was some sort of relationship brewing there. And outside now of looking at acquisitions that make sense, just looking at things that PlayStation actually needs, I think they desperately need a Western RPG studio. It's getting to the point where Microsoft has almost every single relevant Western RPG maker in the business. And I mean, that market, the Western RPG genre, has grown to be the one of, if not the most successful genre on the planet. So there's not many options left on the table. You do have to look at something like Alarian. After the success of Baldur's Gate 3, though, I don't think that price is going to be low. I don't even know if they would want to entertain having some corporate overlord if they can do what they just did independently published and developed. That's so fucking crazy, but they absolutely pulled that off. So why have a corporate overlord? You're not going to be able to get BioWare because of EA, and you probably can't afford EA. CDPR maybe, but man, I mean, they pulled Cyberpunk 2077 off of the PlayStation Store, which I know that can't fracture an entire relationship, but god damn, that was brutal on Sony's behalf, just pulling the game, which they should have pulled the game, but I don't know. I couldn't really see CDPR being bought out by Sony either. I think the idea that I really gravitate towards here for Sony's Western RPG factory would be the idea of Sony building its own, with like X CDPR talent, X BioWare talent, X Larian talent, X Bethesda talent, and then just meshing this kind of dream team together that you created from the ground up, and not having to go out and acquire one. I think that would make the most sense for them to, because listen, I know that people try to spin it that Ghost is an RPG and that Horizon's an RPG and that God of War is an RPG. Look, having a game with loot and gear, like, that's not what makes an RPG to me. It's like the agency in the narrative, having, these decisions and maybe creating characters and actually getting to like feel like you're playing a role in this story that's evolving. That's what an RPG is to me personally. And I don't think Sony has anything comparable to Bethesda, to Obsidian, to In Exile, to fucking now, I guess, Playground, developing Fable. If they can end up getting a hit out of that, they don't have anything comparable there. And I think they desperately need it, with that genre becoming an absolute behemoth. And now to talk about some Xbox acquisitions that make a little bit of sense. I think the absolute most obvious one is Asobo. Plague Tale, Microsoft Flight Sim, they obviously have a great working relationship. I know people don't like the term organic, but that would absolutely be an organic acquisition. They've been working together for a while, and Asobo has incredible tech, and they are incredibly prolific. You're talking about a team that released Requiem in 2022 and Innocence in 2019. That turnaround period for a game of that caliber is unheard of today. I think that's a very smart acquisition, and I do think that Asobo ends up getting acquired by Microsoft. It wouldn't make sense to not acquire that team. Another one that makes sense to me is Avalanche. The makers, the team who's creating Contraband, the makers of Mad Max, the makers of Just Cause. They're already working with Xbox. Like I said earlier, I worry about that Contraband game. We saw the teaser of it in like 2020 and 2021. We've seen nothing of it since then. And that worries me, that maybe there's some hardships going on at that studio currently, which would absolutely be a bummer. And if it was forced to a situation where the studio had to close down or they could get bought up by Microsoft, that would be one of the rare instances where I am in favor of an acquisition. And I think that having a team who can kind of give you that Grand Theft Auto competitor, that's one of the very few teams out there that could actually offer that. And Xbox has nothing similar. I mean, I guess Crackdown, but Avalanche makes better games than Crackdown. So having something that could give you somewhat of a GTA competitor, I think would be a good pickup. Embracer, it makes all the sense in the world for Xbox, in my opinion, if they're really going to go full in on Game Pass and just delivering quantity, 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 quantity. And I don't want to take credit for this. I listened to Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke, the Last Stand Media podcast, Sphere, and I heard Colin Moriarty mention this. And I think that it absolutely makes sense. If you need that level of quantity, in Game Pass, then nothing makes more sense than Embracer. You're talking about Tomb Raider and Deus Ex and Destroy All Humans, Legacy of Kain, and now the Lord of the Rings. And that's just like kind of the higher quality stuff. You also got Saints Row and Elix and Gothic and Darksiders and Jagged Alliance. And you have of a lot of quantity thrown into that mix there. And even the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, like there's a lot there is a lot over there under that Embracer umbrella. And if your whole entire goal is quantity, nobody makes more sense than Embracer. They seem to be flailing right now. Go swoop in, grab it for a bargain at this point, and make out like a bandit. And I think that in terms of what I believe the biggest purchase for Microsoft will be in the next 5 years, I think it'll be Sega. I do think they're going to buy Sega. They're super buddy. It has to be for a reason. All the Yakuza games in Game Pass, Persona 3, fucking all those announcements popping up at the Xbox showcase. And yeah, it seems absolutely evident that Sega will be acquired by Xbox. I mean, the entire Xbox brand was essentially the Dreamcast 2 with Shenmue 2 coming to Xbox exclusively, and Jet Set Radio Future, and so this is, once again, if you want to throw around that organic term, that would be very organic in my opinion. Another one that I don't think people are quite aware of, I don't think they're seeing this percolate behind the scenes, is this Annapurna relationship that's been kind of blossoming over the years, over the last like 2 or 3 years in particular with Xbox. They have Cocoon coming to Game Pass day one. They have Thirsty Suitors coming to Game Pass day one. They have Ghost Bike coming to Game Pass day one. Bounty Star Game Pass day one. A Memoir Blue Game Pass day one. 12 Minutes was Game Pass day one. Like they have very much been working super close with Xbox. And I know that Annapurna likes to be the indie hit darling, the critical darling factory, but I don't know, man. Someone comes offering a couple $100 million. I don't know. And like I said earlier with CDPR, I could see either PlayStation or Xbox. It's like I couldn't really see it, but I could also kind of see it. They seem to kind of be in disarray at this point. So them getting purchased wouldn't blow my mind. And if you're Microsoft and you grab CDPR, it's a wrap. You totally have the Western RPG market on lock. I'm not even sure if you would call, because CDPR Poland is, I don't know if you could call them technically. Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess they just recently opened up like Los Angeles based studio, so you maybe call them a Western RPG. Their games are like Western RPGs. You get what I'm saying. All right, guys. So I'm cutting in here from the future. I was editing the video, and I was like, man, I feel like I forgot to talk about something in that video. And I totally forgot to talk about the Activision Blizzard lineup of games and what I predict to see from that lineup in the next 5 years. It's like, that's kind of a big deal. The biggest video game acquisition in the history of video game acquisitions, probably worth talking about that in this video. So that's what we're going to do here now. We're going to go through some of the biggest Activision Blizzard titles and predict what will come back, what will stay dormant, what I think we could see over the next 5 years from these Activision Blizzard games. So let's kick it off with old Tony Hawk. Let's talk about some Tony Hawk. I don't think we'll see another Tony Hawk game released this generation, but I do think we'll see another Tony Hawk game announced this generation. Within the next 5 years, I do think we'll see a new Tony Hawk game announced, but I don't think we'll see it released by 2028. The real question is, will it be Tony Hawk Underground, a remake of that, Or will it be, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake? Or will it be a brand new, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 6? I would imagine if I had to like lay down some money on it, I would probably predict 3 and 4 remade. I think that's a more seamless transition from 1 and 2. If you're talking Tony Hawk Underground, there's a lot more moving parts in that game than directly going from 1 and 2 remake to 3 and 4 remake, especially because a lot of the best mechanics from 3 and 4 have already been transferred into Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake. So I think we will see that announced, but I don't think it gets released by 2028. And next up, let's talk about Spyro. And I don't think we see anything new from Spyro at all this generation. Nothing released or announced, other than like, I think we'll get the Reignited trilogy. I think that'll come to Game Pass. But I will say, for the case of Spyro, and I don't feel this way about Tony Hawk. I think that Tony Hawk, if it comes out, I could very well see that being exclusive to Xbox, because Tony Hawk was multi-platform. Pretty much its entire legacy has been multi-platform. So you can't quite make the same case that you can make for Spyro and Crash, which both, were exclusive to PlayStation for a long ass time. And that legacy just feels too cemented to too attached to PlayStation to pull Spyro or Crash from PlayStation. But I don't think regardless, I don't think we see anything other than the Reignited trilogy coming to Game Pass in this generation. But on the other hand, with Crash, I do think that we'll get some more Crash content this generation. I don't know if it'll be, Crash 5 or Crash Bash remake, or I really don't know what it'll be, but I do think we get another Crash game. And once again, I think that one will be multi-platform as well. Prototype is one that I would actually really like to see come back, because I just have an Infamous itch at times. I want to just dive into something like Infamous, and Prototype would definitely scratch that, but I think there's zero chance we get a new Prototype. But I do think both games, I think they're both backwards compatible, so I 100% they'll both be on Game Pass. Hexen, I doubt it with Hexen. They already have Doom, they already have Wolfenstein, which Hexen is kind of a direct competitor to that. You have more magical powers and shit going on in Hexen, but I don't think we see Hexen launch this generation. Here's one that I'm once again very hopeful for, is the Spider-Man Remastered Collection. And there's just so many awesome ass Spider-Man games that Activision published back in the day that it would just be great to see them fully backwards compatible. I don't really necessarily need a remaster or a remake, definitely not a remake, but just a straight up port, or having them available to buy on the Xbox store, or having them just in Game Pass would work perfectly fine for me. And, they're not going to be able to get, or I imagine they're not going to be able to get like the Sam Raimi tie-in games, Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. But dude, they have so much other than that. They have Ultimate Spider-Man, Edge of Time, Shattered Dimensions, Web of Shadows, Friend or Foe. They have a laundry list of all. And I think even that Wolverine game on Xbox 360, I believe that was Activision published as well. Because I think that was Ravensoft that developed it. So it had to have been Activision published. So they just have a crazy Ultimate Alliance, I believe, is Activision as well. They just have a crazy lineup of superhero titles from the PS2 and PS3 generation that I would love to see at least backwards compatible. And then if you could get it on Game Pass, that's even more bang for the buck, which I imagine if it was ever backwards compatible, it would be on Game Pass. So I'd love to see that, but if I had to predict one way or the other, I'd probably say no. Next up, let's talk about the one I want brought back more than anything else from the Activision Blizzard catalog, the True Crime game series. True Crime Streets of LA, Streets of New York. I loved those games back in the day, but what I really want more than anything is a full-on True Crime Streets of Hong Kong, because you essentially have where Sleeping Dogs was a spiritual successor to the True Crime series, and now we could go full circle and create a spiritual successor to Sleeping Dogs by rebooting the True Crime series, which would be an absolute dream to me. I think Sleeping Dogs is one of the best, if not the best, open world, Grand Theft Auto inspired game that I've ever played in my life. The MMA, the melee combat is just so satisfying, so good. And is there any chance we have it brought back? I would say absolutely not, but I don't know, man. That's just an absolute dream of mine that I doubt we'll ever see come to fruition. Guitar Hero. This is absolutely 1000% returning this generation. The always online, the live service world that we're living in now, it just seems to lend itself so naturally to Guitar Hero, especially as we're seeing, the latency issues and shit are slowly becoming less intrusive in the always online live service space. So Guitar Hero absolutely has a place in that world, I imagine. And I think we 100% see the return of Guitar Hero this generation. Blur is an interesting one. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's already backwards compatible on the Series X. So I think it'll just likely come to Game Pass. I don't think we'll see, a new Blur title announced or released this generation, but I do think it'll come back to Game Pass or come to Game Pass. And yeah, I actually really enjoyed Blur back in the day, but I could see it coming to Game Pass, but I don't think it has enough cachet to really I shouldn't say deserve, but I don't think it has enough name value. I don't think its name holds enough weight to be like rebooted to go head to head with Need for Speed and Forza Horizon and shit like that. Gun is another one similar to Blur, where I think this is already backwards compatible, if I'm not mistaken. And this, I don't think its name, I don't think it has that name value to warrant a full-on reboot. I would love to see that, especially, it seems like we're going to be waiting quite a while to get a Red Dead Redemption 3 if we ever do. So if Microsoft was like, hey, let's fill that void, let's put 250 300 million dollars into rebooting Gun so that we can kind of get that Red Dead 3 cash on our end, I would absolutely be all the way on board to see that. But I just think it'll come back to Game Pass. Don't think it'll be revived, remastered, rebooted, remade, anything like that. And sticking on to a similar thread here that we just talked about with Gun kind of filling the Red Dead Redemption 3 void, we have Pitfall. And if you want to fill that Uncharted void, if you want to fill that Tomb Raider void, which I know that Tomb Raider game is in the works with Amazon, and you also do have the Indiana Jones game, but I don't know. It is kind of cool to have the game that without Pitfall, who knows if we see an Uncharted, who knows if we ever see a Tomb Raider. And, obviously, like I said, Indiana Jones was the inspiration, the main inspiration behind all of it. But yeah, I don't know. I think this game has a legacy, and it would be kind of cool to just see it rebooted and really, really a couple $100 million sunk into the development of it to see what you could get out of Pitfall. And Xbox doesn't really have a strong catalog of third-person, like, story-driven games. So I don't know. I'm not totally ruling out that we see this. I don't think we'll see it this generation, but I'm not totally ruling out that we could possibly see it next generation. I could see like an announcement of Pitfall for 2027 and then it releases in like 2032, some shit like that. Another big one is Singularity. And once again, similar talking about Hexen, I think Xbox has a large supply of first person shooters, but this one would just be a great addition to Game Pass. I don't think we'll see anything more from that, but this has like a hardcore kind of cult fan base in the same way that Sleeping Dogs does, where it's like a really passionate, hardcore fan base who considers this one of the best first person shooter like campaigns out there. So I don't know. That would be a cool one to return to, but I think we'll just see it launched on Game Pass. And a big one here is StarCraft. And there was this rumor that StarCraft 3 was in development and was like going to be this kind of more of a third person shooter, but I don't know, man. The rumor kind of seems like very much a shot in the dark, kind of blindly throwing darts at a board type thing. It just, I don't know. I do think if we're going to see StarCraft 3 at all, it would be announced and then probably it'd be a few years until it releases. So I don't think there's really any chance that it's out by 2028 unless it's already much deeper in development than we know. But yeah, I couldn't see it coming out by 2028. But absolutely, StarCraft will be a game that launches at some point under Microsoft's ownership of Activision Blizzard. Next up, let's talk about Tenchu. And I personally think that a Tenchu remastered collection makes a lot of sense. And if I had to bet money on it, I actually do think we'll see a Tenchu remastered collection at some point this generation. I mean, for one, this game has a legitimate cult following, was a real cult hit with, obviously FromSoft's involvement in the development of Tenchu. And realistically, I wouldn't even rule out a new game being announced this generation, a new Tenchu game being announced this generation. And this is one that I 1000% think will be exclusive to Xbox. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was a 360 game. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was a Tenchu 360 game that was already exclusive to Xbox. So I think they'll do more with this IP for sure. Rather it be just a remastered collection or launching rebooting the franchise entirely. But at the very least, I think we see a remastered collection on Game Pass that's exclusive to Xbox. All right, now we'll start rapid fire running through these. Diablo, we're of course not going to see a new Diablo game launch in the next 5 years. We'll see updates to Diablo 4. Diablo 4 will launch on Game Pass at some point in the next couple years, but yeah, we're not going to see a new Diablo game. Call of Duty, of course, that'll be annualized like clockwork. Every holiday season, you'll be playing some new Call of Duty content. And yeah, the only real question is like the exclusivity. When will Xbox get its exclusive Call of Duty game? I don't think that ever happens, if I'm being totally realistic. I think it just makes so much money being available everywhere that it really wouldn't even make sense to pull it from PlayStation. I think it's honestly going to make more sense trying to get it onto Nintendo and just keeping as many options available for people to dive into that game as possible. My big worry for Call of Duty is the fact that all of these IP, all of these franchises that we're talking about here, the most likely scenario I see in my head is that a majority of these don't return because of that Call of Duty, that Call of Duty demand and how many teams have to work on Call of Duty year round. The Ravensoft, the Toys for Bob, like all these teams that could be working on a new Tony Hawk game or a Singularity or a fucking whatever, a Pitfall. And these teams, these really talented teams, it all being consolidated and restricted by the Call of Duty factory, the Call of Duty machine that it takes to create these games and crank them out on a yearly cadence. Like, I think that it's very likely that we don't see the return of many of these franchises because of the workload that it takes to get Call of Duty out on an annual basis. And that's unfortunate, but I think that's just the reality. World of Warcraft, I think it's probably very tantalizing to figure out some console version of World of Warcraft to get it out on consoles, but I think it'll probably just, launch on Game Pass PC or something like that. I'm not a World of Warcraft game, but I don't know. I guess maybe a PC Game Pass port could work. Overwatch 2, I think it'll just go to Game Pass, but I doubt we see anything Overwatch 3 probably ever, or at least definitely not in this generation, but I don't even know if we'll ever see an Overwatch 3. All right, jumping back in here, because when I was predicting console sales and all of that good stuff, I completely forgot that this generation is going to at least be 2 years longer than any of the Xbox, PlayStation generations that we've had before. So I wanted to adjust my console sales numbers a little bit. So jumping in here, kicking it off with Xbox Series S and X, I think that it will end up selling around 75 million units. The 360 was the peak for Xbox with around 85 million. Xbox One was around 50 million. So I think this will obviously do much better than the Xbox One. And I think that with first party delivering the way we've talked about, when we went through the years, and that first party lineup is better than any generation of Xbox ever. In my predictions, if it ends up turning out that way, who knows? But that lineup would be pretty fucking great for Xbox, and I think that will really, really shift console sales in a big way. I also think that the demand for the Series S and Series X, like complete parity between, you know, the software releases for Series S having to have all the same features as the Series X version. I think that'll probably give way within the next couple years. By 2026, I imagine that will totally be out the window, and games like Baldur's Gate 3 will be able to have their split screen co-op mode available on the Series X, and Forza Motorsport and Halo Infinite, they'll be able to have their split screen co-op mode available on the Series X and not have to worry about implementing that feature into the Series S. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if we started seeing like Series X exclusive games, the games that you couldn't play on your Series S. That might be a bit drastic, but I do think we'll start to see the Series X really flourish whenever there's not like a complete demand for parity across the board from all, you know, software releases that come to Series X having to have exact parity on the Series S. And now moving on to the PS5, I'm expecting 108 million PlayStation 5 consoles sold by 2028. PS4 is around 117 million units sold right now. I don't think they're going to reach those numbers by the end of the generation. For one, you're talking about the PlayStation 4 generation being one of, if not the best PlayStation generation of all time on an exclusive front, with The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima and Uncharted 4, Days Gone, Horizon, God of War, fucking Spider-Man, and then, you know, second and third party exclusives, just crazy. A Final Fantasy 7 remake, Detroit Become Human. You just had so much exclusive content that was driving you to pick up that system. And you know, a lot of that, especially in the first party sphere, is going to be removed with their new focus on this live service initiative. And you can definitely understand and respect the pursuit of the Fortnite bag. I understand why anyone would want Call of Duty, Fortnite, Destiny style money, NBA 2K style money. But, you know, I think it will hurt the perceived value of that console overall by the end of the generation. But once again, the PlayStation 5 is already selling like absolute wildfire, and it's built off the back of the goodwill from the PlayStation 4 generation. And so a lot of people are just going to pick up the console because they know the next God of War, they know the next Spider-Man, they know the next Horizon, whatever is going to be exclusive to PlayStation 5. And yeah, and even on the case of God of War Ragnarok, it's like, okay, that's the best place to play that game. Horizon Forbidden West, that's the best place to play that game. So you still have that allure, you still have that appeal for the PlayStation 5. But I do think by the end of the generation, it's going to kind of lose its luster a little bit. And I think by the end of the Xbox generation, it's really going to start picking up steam. And I think by, you know, Xbox Series Y or whatever the fuck they call their next console, I think you'll really start to see a huge surge of players buying in on that day one, because it's like, oh shit, you know, the sequel to Clockwork Revolution, the sequel to Starfield or whatever is going to be exclusive to this platform. I'm jumping in day one. But it's way too much ground to make up at this point to have any kind of, you know, on par at the end of this generation. Anybody that's expecting PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series XS console sales to be neck and neck, I think that's a bit, yeah, I think it's a bit too soon. I think it would take one more generation for the goodwill, the positive buzz, the positive conversation to shift in a meaningful manner in terms of people buying into that ecosystem on a, you know, a real, like, that's a financial commitment. $500 you're throwing down on the table to get that Xbox into your house. Like, that's a real deal commitment. And I think it will take another generation off the built up goodwill from this generation to really start seeing that success on a high level. I do wonder, and I know people are going to get mad at this. I'm not making any claims on this because this is way above my intellectual level. I do wonder if what we're seeing with kind of the subscription service model maybe not being quite as lucrative as we were led to believe with Netflix and Disney Plus and a lot of these subscription models, it seems like there's some panic going on in that ecosystem, in that sphere. And I do wonder if we see the same thing with Game Pass in the future. I do wonder if we start seeing more things like we have with Starfield and Forza, where you can buy in at a higher price to get the game earlier. I wonder if that window begins increasing. Like, I wonder if you get to a point where if you buy it for $70 a la carte, that you can play it 3 months early or 6 months early, and then it comes to Game Pass later on. Like, I just wonder if there's going to be any sort of shift. And to me, just looking at it, from afar, it seems that the subscription service for film and television is more conducive. It seems more natural than a subscription service for gaming, where film and television, a totally passive medium. You kick it on, you watch a movie for 2 hours, you bounce to the next thing, and you're bouncing back and forth to a bunch of different things. Whereas with Game Pass, there's a lot of games on there, and some of the high priority games are things that you're going to want to stick with for hundreds of hours at a time. Your Starfields, and when you get to games like the Outer Worlds that are 20-30 hours, and there's a lot of bigger titles on there that to me definitely add value to the service. But I could see someone looking at it from afar and being like, yeah, well, I'll just buy my couple games that I play each year for $70, opposed to paying, because by the end of the generation, we know it's not going to be $15 a month for Game Pass. We know it's going to get up to, I would say, at the very least $20 a month. And I'm curious what the response, what the reaction to all of this is going to be. If I had to put money down on something, I would say Game Pass it still exists. I still think it'll be around by the end of the generation. I don't think that there's Activision alone, that purchase alone ensures that Microsoft, Xbox, or that division is going to be totally, totally fine. But I don't have 100% confidence in Game Pass working long term. I don't know. I could be wrong. This is just like a gut feeling. I have no fucking idea. I'm an idiot on the internet. And let me be very clear. I love Game Pass. I absolutely love it. Some of my favorite games from the last few years, I would have never checked out if it was not for Game Pass. As Dusk Falls and Immortality and Signalis and Norco and Hi-Fi Rush, Midnight Fight. Like, I could go on and on. There's games that I would have never played if it were not for Game Pass. So I don't want to see Game Pass go away, because it would likely be similar with me, where I return back to playing pretty much exclusively AAA titles, because I think Game Pass is so great for indies and for AA titles. And I hope it sticks around for that reason. If I had to pay $70 for Starfield, I'd happily pay $70 for Starfield. If I had to pay $70 for Fable, Clockwork Revolution, I would happily pay $70 for that. I really want Game Pass to stick around for the indies and for the AA experiences that I would likely pass on if it wasn't already in this service that I pay for. So I don't know, man. And I guess more than anything, it's going to depend on what Microsoft's expectations are for Game Pass in terms of the subscriber count, where recently it was reported that console Game Pass subscriptions were kind of stagnating a bit, and PC growth was doing pretty well for Game Pass. So I don't know. I remember back in the day, reports of like 100 million Game Pass subscribers were what they were hopeful for, I believe, which hopeful for doesn't necessarily mean what they look at as a success for the service. But if we're at like 30 million right now, there's no world by the end of this generation where I could see anything more than like 50 max, and I don't know. Is that a success? I have no idea what their expectations are. But speaking from a purely consumeristic standpoint, of course, I absolutely want Game Pass to stick around. I love the damn service. I want it to stick around, as well as I want, $70 full price games to stick around as well. I want a variety of options for how we can support this industry that we all love. I feel like Hollywood leaned way too aggressively, way too heavily, way too quickly all in to this subscription service model where it almost seems like subscription service or bust for that industry, and that seems kind of scary. So I hope that we have variety. So whatever situation, whatever issues arise in the gaming industry, you can have different ways of supporting the developers and publishers and the games that you want to see more of. On the other end with Sony, we've already pretty much covered everything here, but on Sony's end, I think that the fan base grows progressively more and more discontent with their lineup of games by the end of the generation. And I think by the end of the generation, they start pivoting back towards catering towards that older demographic of gamers who want, the more narrative driven, story driven games. And they probably find their big hit cash cow with either the Insomniac Marvel Gaming Universe game, or they find their cash cow with the Horizon MMO or something. And they kind of stick to that as their big live service game that they continue to support for years and years and years. And then they, let these other teams create non-live service content. And I think that into the PlayStation 6 generation, you see kind of a reinvigorated Sony to create original, unique content. And yeah, but I do think we're going to go through the next few years of PlayStation. I think we're going to go through some real rough patches as they kind of try to iron out and figure out this live service pursuit. So yeah, that's my kind of big, long-winded takeaway of this generation for Xbox, for PlayStation. I think it'll be a good generation for both. I think tail end of Xbox generation is like great. I think that PlayStation has like a consistently okay to good generation. And I think for the first time ever, we look back and we're like, damn, I think Xbox might have outperformed PlayStation in terms of first party exclusive content. But yeah, guys, that is pretty much it for my long-winded thoughts on the next 5 years of PlayStation and Xbox. So hit me in the comments down below. Let me know your opinions, your predictions for the next 5 years for PlayStation and Xbox as well. And make sure to stay tuned for the community poll. I'll put one out soon, probably as soon as I drop this video. I'll put out a community post the day after and let you guys vote for one of the next videos that I work on as well. So stay tuned for that and have your voice heard here on the channel and get some content that you want made out there in the ether. So stay tuned, guys. Appreciate y'all, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.